A vast surge of emerald energy erupted from Su Ro's body, crashing outward like waves, its sheer power rivaling that of Lu Cheng and Hu Shuo before her. The two were visibly startled by the sudden release of strength from Su Ro. During the earlier clash with the Stormcloud dynasty, they had witnessed her formidable abilities, though she had still been a step behind them in power. But now, under their very eyes, Su Ro's strength had soared, matching theirs in an instant. Even Lu Cheng and Hu Shuo, seasoned warriors as they were, couldn't help but feel a flicker of shock. Emerald energy surged around her as Su Ro gracefully moved her palms. The energy gathered, gleaming like jade, before colliding directly with the wild, forceful palm strikes of Lu Cheng and Hu Shuo. Bang! Primordial energy exploded, scattering dry leaves on the ground to dust in an instant, swept away by the fierce gusts of wind. Su Ro was forced back several steps by the violent impact, but the green glow around her flickered rapidly, dispelling the invasive energy as it tried to penetrate her body. Lu Cheng and Hu Shuo also took a step back, but since they were attacking in unison, they still held the upper hand. Even with Su Ro's sudden rise in strength, the two of them together still had an advantage. Though the situation wasn't yet slipping out of control, Su Ro's unexpected power did surprise the duo. Their eyes flickered over to the battered Death Spirit General in the distance. Both of them narrowed their eyes. They knew very well how strong the Death Spirit General was, and yet, even he had been left in such a miserable state at the hands of that young man. We need to finish this fast. Suppressing the storm of emotions inside, Lu Cheng and Hu Shuo exchanged a glance, each nodding grimly. They had assumed that the Death Spirit General's involvement would ensure an easy victory over Lin Dong and his group. But no one had anticipated that the usually laid-back little mink possessed such terrifying strength. Now, they needed to deal with Su Ro quickly. If they hesitated too long and allowed Lin Dong and Little Yin to fully recover from their injuries, the tide would turn against them in an instant. After witnessing Lin Dong and Little Yin's combat power earlier, even Lu Cheng and Hu Shuo were unsure if they could defeat them. Moreover, their supposed trump card, the Death Spirit General, had proven ineffective and was being thoroughly suppressed by the concealed might of Little Mink. This battle had to end swiftly. Boom! A fierce glint flashed in their eyes as Lu Cheng and Hu Shuo struck in perfect synchronization, stepping forward without hesitation. The pressure they exerted immediately enveloped Su Ro. Death Demon Seal. Dark energy surged from their hands, condensing into two massive black seals. The seals were covered in eerie, ghost-like runes, emanating waves of corrosive death energy as they hurtled towards Su Ro. The black energy was particularly sinister. Though it wasn't the true death aura of the life and death mystical realm, it was still dangerous. Even a Nirvana stage expert would find it troublesome if this energy infiltrated their body. Su Ro quickly recognized the threat of the dark energy. Her expression grew serious as emerald energy gathered in her palms, making her hands appear like translucent jade. Bang! With lightning speed, her jade-like hands slashed through the air, delivering dozens of palm strikes in mere moments, each one landing squarely on the black seals. Boom! Boom! The overwhelming emerald energy caused the black seals to tremble violently, cracks starting to form as they teetered on the verge of collapse. Humph! Seeing Su Ro's relentless assault, seemingly unbothered by the corrosive nature of their death energy, Lu Cheng and Hu Shuo snorted coldly. They punched their fists into the seals, channeling even more primordial energy into them. The black seals grew heavier, like mountains, crushing Su Ro's jade palm strikes. The sudden increase in pressure caused beads of sweat to form on Su Ro's forehead. While she had gained control over the mysterious power within her, it wasn't fully refined yet. Against opponents of the third Nirvana stage, this hadn't been a major issue. But now, facing Lu Cheng and Hu Shuo, both seasoned experts of the fourth Nirvana stage, and battling both at once, the shortcomings of her power were beginning to show. Even so, Su Ro gritted her teeth and refused to back down. She could feel the rapid recovery of Lin Dong and Little Yan's strength behind her. She had to hold on just a little longer. If she could endure, they would wake soon, and then there would be no need to fear these enemies any longer. Boom! Boom! As Su Rou fought valiantly against Lu Cheng and Hu Shua's onslaught, elsewhere, Little Mink was relentlessly driving the Death Spirit General into a corner. If not for the General's strangely resilient body, Little Mink would have already ended him. It was becoming clear to the Death Spirit General that Little Mink was even stronger than he was. Defeating this foe was now impossible, but he could still hold out, waiting for Lu Cheng and Hu Shua to finish their battle. The Death Spirit General's plan was quite clever, but Little Mink was just as shrewd. In an instant, he saw through the General's intentions, and his gaze grew colder, his strikes becoming even more ruthless. Despite this, it had to be said that the Death Spirit General's strength was formidable, likely at the 5th Nirvana stage. With some strange techniques to boot, he was still able to survive under Little Mink's fierce assault. His slippery movements made Little Mink almost want to unleash the full power of his heavenly demon mink form and finish him off immediately. But he quickly suppressed that impulse. They were already deep within the core region of the battlefield, and there would certainly be powerful experts from the major sects watching. If he used the power of the heavenly demon mink here, he would surely be noticed by those experts. Little Mink didn't know whether any of the major sects harbored hatred towards his heavenly demon mink clan. To avoid unnecessary trouble, he could only restrain himself as much as possible. Let's see how long you can run. Little Mink's eyes flashed with icy light as his attacks became even more vicious. The Death Spirit General, already under immense pressure, grew more panicked, his eyes flashing with fear as he narrowly dodged another strike. In desperation, he shouted, "Lu Cheng, use the Ghost Claw." Not far away, where Lu Cheng and Hu Shua were relentlessly pushing Su Rou back, the two exchanged a glance upon hearing the cry. Their expressions shifted before they gritted their teeth and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. At the same time, dark primordial energy surged, enveloping the blood as it began to writhe rapidly. Whoa! As the black light churned, a chilling wind howled, carrying with it ghostly wails that sent shivers down the spine. Kill! The black mist twisted and finally condensed into a massive black ghost claw. The claw was covered in countless sinister human faces, and shrill, piercing screams echoed from it, making the primordial energy in the air tremble violently. Once the ghost claw took shape, it carried a bone-chilling wave of energy as it tore through the air, heading straight for Su Rou, who was struggling to hold on. The force behind the ghost claw was so immense that even the air seemed to shatter as it descended. Seeing this brutal attack, Su Rou's pale face showed a trace of determination. She bit her lip and prepared to unlock the third seal. According to Little Mink, using the third seal with her current strength could cause severe damage to her body. But right now, there was no time to worry about that. Su Rou bit her lip lightly, her slender fingers reaching for the third seal on her wrist. However, just as she was about to undo it, a hand suddenly extended from behind and gently grasped hers. A soft voice, though not particularly strong, gave her an overwhelming sense of security. "Lin Dong." Su Rou's clear, delicate face immediately lit up with surprise and joy as she looked at the figure that had emerged behind her. "You don't need to unlock the seal. You've done enough?" The figure gently patted Su Rou's head with a smile before raising his gaze to Lu Cheng and Hu Shua in the sky. A cold smile crept onto his lips. "Leave the rest to us. These pests just don't know when to quit." The ghost claw, surrounded by dark light, emitted countless eerie wails that filled the air with a sharp, dizzying sound, clearly capable of attacking one's mental strength. Lin Dong. The moment Lin Dong appeared in front of Su Rou, Lu Cheng and Hu Shua's faces changed drastically. But it was too late to retreat now. Cold light flashed in their eyes, and with a vicious gleam on their faces, they clenched their fists. An even more intense wave of dark energy surged from their hands, pouring into the ghost claw. They had witnessed Lin Dong's strength earlier in the day and knew better than to underestimate him. Of course, their power was on par with Feng Tsang's, so while they regarded Lin Dong seriously, they did not fear him excessively. Together, they believed even Lin Dong would be forced to retreat. As the two poured their primordial energy into the claw, the black ghost claw darkened, becoming almost tangible. Its sharp talons clawed downward, leaving faint cracks in the space itself. Lin Dong raised his head, his eyes narrowing as the foul-smelling ghost claw approached. He clenched his hand, and a black iron seal appeared in his palm. It was the black dragon roaring heaven seal that he had taken from Feng Tsang. During his time recovering, Lin Dong had fully refined this heaven-tier spiritual treasure, and now it truly belonged to him. Very well. Let's see how you fare against the power of a heaven-tier spiritual treasure. A cold smile flickered in Lin Dong's eyes as he tightened his grip on the black iron seal. It erupted with a powerful black light, but unlike the ghost claw's sinister aura, this light was filled with overwhelming pressure and raw ferocity. The black dragon coiled around the seal slowly opened its eyes. In the next instant, a massive wave of black sound waves burst from its mouth, sweeping toward the ghost claw like a tidal wave. Ding ding ding. The black sound waves struck the ghost claw, creating a series of metallic clanging noises. These sound waves were sharp enough to tear through the body of a third Nirvana stage expert with ease. The sheer number of these sound waves made it impossible to escape their assault. Even a fourth Nirvana stage expert would find it difficult to withstand such a barrage. Under the relentless impact of the black sound waves, the ghost claw began to tremble violently, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the ghost claw, which had been infused with Lu Qiong and Hu Shua's combined energy, shattered into pieces, much to their shock. Retreat. Seeing the ghost claw shatter, Lu Qiong and Hu Shua's faces changed drastically. Without hesitation, they both shot backward. Trying to run? Lin Dong's cold smile deepened. With a flick of his fingers, dozens of black sound waves twisted into an arc and shot forward, instantly closing the distance to the retreating pair. The cold wind howling toward them made Lu Qiong and Hu Shua's expressions even more grim. They quickly activated their internal primordial energy, and brilliant golden light burst from their bodies as they triggered their Nirvana golden bodies. Hiss hiss. The black sound waves sliced through the golden light, carving deep gashes into Lu Qiong and Hu Shua's Nirvana golden bodies. They both let out agonized screams, clutching their wounds as they staggered back. The power of the heaven-tier spiritual treasure was finally revealed. Lu Qiong and Hu Shua, both at the fourth Nirvana stage, were as strong as Feng Tsang. Normally, it would take Lin Dong considerable effort to injure the two of them. But with the black dragon roaring heaven seal, he was able to shatter their combined attack and wound them in the first exchange. Falling into a disadvantage and sustaining injuries so quickly, Lu Qiong and Hu Shua's eyes flickered with panic. They hadn't expected the situation to turn against them so swiftly. They had been observing Lin Dong and his companions for some time, but had hesitated to strike in Myriad Elephant City, fearing they would alert Song Tai. Now that they had finally made their move, they realized how badly they had miscalculated. Retreat. The two exchanged a glance and immediately decided to flee. But before they could accelerate their retreat, a powerful blast of energy descended from above. A dark shadow in the shape of a massive staff slammed down like a mountain, crashing into their bodies without mercy. Blood sprayed from their mouths as they were sent flying, crashing through several giant trees. The golden light surrounding their bodies dimmed considerably. A towering figure descended from the sky, exuding a fierce and murderous aura. Wielding the iron staff, he twirled it through the air, creating gusts of wind. Since you've come, you won't be leaving. Little Yan's eyes gleamed with a savage light as his low voice, brimming with killing intent, echoed through the forest. Facing Lin Dong, who held the black iron seal in hand, and Little Yan, who carried an iron staff on his shoulder, Lu Qiong and Hu Shua's faces turned pale. They glared viciously and shouted, "Lin Dong, do you really want to make an enemy of us? The people backing us are not someone a small fry like you can handle. Don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. We can leave today without troubling you further, but don't push your luck." Lin Dong's expression remained indifferent. The black iron seal in his hand radiated black energy in waves. He turned his head toward them, his lips curling into a smile, but to Lu Qiong and Hu Shua, the sight of his white teeth only added to their dread. "There's no need for you to leave. No matter who's behind you, I'll be taking your lives today." Lin Dong's smile widened, and in the next moment, the black seal shot out of his hand. A violent and terrifying wave of energy surged forward, filling Lu Cheng and Hu Shua's eyes with terror. Black light spread, and a massive black dragon phantom slowly took shape, exuding a suffocating pressure. This was the dragon spirit residing within the black dragon roaring heaven seal, an immensely powerful force. Even during the daytime, Lin Dong had been forced to use the heavenly dragon aura within him to defeat it, and even then, he had only managed a narrow victory. The dragon spirit's might was undeniable. Lu Cheng and Hu Shual were no less formidable than Feng Cang, clearly not easy opponents. So Lin Dong wasted no time in unleashing this potent weapon. He was already fed up with these ghost-like individuals constantly lurking around, their schemes, and their persistence. Lin Dong didn't care who or what was behind them. He wasn't interested in their motives. What mattered was that their repeated actions had pushed his killing intent to its peak. Lin Dong despised the feeling of being watched constantly, and tonight, he was determined to eliminate the threat at its root. Roar! The black dragon roared as a vast expanse of black light spread like a dark curtain over the land, flooding the area with a violent, indescribable energy. Lu Cheng and Hu Shua turned even paler at the sight of Lin Dong's overwhelming strike. From the black dragon's phantom, they could smell the stench of death. They finally realized that Lin Dong had genuinely made up his mind to kill them. Myriad Ghost King body. Dark, sinister energy erupted from Lu Cheng and Hu Shua's bodies. As their hands formed seals, the energy condensed around them into a towering black phantom. The shadowy figure flickered, its form wavering, but from it came the chilling wails of countless ghosts, as though it were a vengeful spirit born from the fusion of 10,000 souls, emitting a terrifying aura of death and malice. Roar! As the black phantom took shape, the black dragon descended. The ground trembled as black light filled the air. In the next instant, the two forces collided violently. Boom! Massive cracks spread across the ground in an instant, and within a 100-meter radius, all the towering trees were reduced to shattered wood fragments. The enormous black phantom, under the crushing force of the black dragon, held out for only a brief moment. Then, under Lu Cheng and Hu Shua's horrified gazes, it began to shatter. With their strongest defense broken, Lu Cheng and Hu Shua were completely exposed to the relentless onslaught of the black dragon. The overwhelming energy poured down upon them. The golden light flickering around their bodies dimmed in an instant, and the black dragon crushed down upon them. The sound of their bones shattering echoed as their bodies were ground to dust. It was a near-complete annihilation. At the same time, in another part of the battlefield, Little Mink's hand, radiating with purple-black light, slammed into the evasive Death Spirit General. Boom! Fierce energy burst from Little Mink's palm, shattering nearly half of the Death Spirit General's body. His form was sent flying into the air before crashing hard onto the ground. Little Mink gazed coldly at the severely injured and weakened Death Spirit General, saying slowly, "It seems your intel was a bit lacking before you made your move. Unfortunately for you, there won't be a second chance." Thick black energy continued to seep from the Death Spirit General's body. Though half of his form had been destroyed, he still clung to life. Any ordinary person would have died instantly, but the Death Spirit General remained alive, his strange form exuding a stubborn vitality. But despite his lingering life force, the Death Spirit General was clearly gravely wounded. His aura was weak, and even the gleam in his eyes had dimmed. Within those darkened eyes, flashes of anger and fear flickered. Never had he imagined he would end up in such a state. With his formidable strength, he could stand his ground against even the top elites of the super dynasties. His power at the 5th Nirvana stage had made him a force to be reckoned with, especially here in the core region. Moreover, with his unique cultivation method, even those who had reached the same stage as him could never push him to this point. No one should have been able to damage his death body so severely. "You can't possibly be from some low-level dynasty," the Death Spirit General roared, his voice hoarse. Though he didn't know much about Little Mink's origins, he was certain that someone with such terrifying abilities couldn't come from a mere low-level dynasty. No matter what kind of fortuitous encounters Little Mink had experienced, It shouldn't have been enough to corner him like this. Little Mink looked at him with cold indifference, uninterested in responding. His slender hand extended, and strands of hair-raising purple-black energy began to gather, spreading an unmistakable aura of killing intent. I already told you, we're not interested in your plans. But you insisted on making things difficult. Since that's the case, I'll just have to erase you. Hearing Little Mink's calm, emotionless words, the Death Spirit General's eyes shifted, and he sneered darkly. You're too naive. You've already learned about our plans, so it's only bad luck for you. Since you're involved, you won't meet a good end unless you end it yourselves. We're not very interested in ending ourselves, Little Mink replied with a smirk. But ending you, now that's something I'm quite keen on. His eyes turned icy, and without giving the Death Spirit General a chance to speak further, Little Mink's hand flipped. Purple-black energy surged out, forming a spear of the same color, which shot forward like a bolt of lightning, piercing through the air and striking the Death Spirit General's already half-shattered body with deadly precision. A wild surge of energy erupted from where the light spear struck the ground. The earth trembled violently, and massive cracks spread out like a spiderweb, covering over 100 meters in an instant. The destructive force was overwhelming. Is it over? Lin Dong quickly moved to stand beside Little Mink, gazing at the shattered ground below, speaking in a quiet voice. From the earlier clash between Little Mink and the Death Spirit General, Lin Dong had sensed how powerful the latter was. That aura surpassed even Huang Zong and his peers, suggesting that this opponent might have already reached the 5th Nirvana stage. At that level, even in the core regions, this figure would be among the best. Without Little Mink's intervention, Lin Dong himself would have had a hard time dealing with the Death Spirit General. Regardless, Lin Dong's cultivation was still only at the 3rd Nirvana stage. While he had many techniques that allowed him to defeat 4th Nirvana stage experts like Huang Zong, eliminating a 5th Nirvana stage expert like the Death Spirit General was beyond his abilities. Little Yin arrived soon after, tightly gripping his iron rod, his eyes filled with killing intent as he stared down below. He, too, could sense how formidable the Death Spirit General was. Little Mink's gaze remained fixed below. After a moment, his eyes narrowed slightly. Whoosh! At that instant, the collapsed ground below suddenly exploded. A torrent of black light surged out, spreading in all directions like a storm. Killing me won't be that easy. Lin Dong, you've killed Lu Cheng and his men, and now this grudge is set in stone. Wait and see. You'll regret getting involved in this mess. Ha ha ha. Before long, you so-called geniuses of the Eastern Mystery region will all end up as slaves. As the black light scattered, a chilling, sinister voice echoed, lingering in the air around Lin Dong and his group. Lin Dong's face darkened as he watched the black light spread. This Death Spirit General was indeed strange. Despite being injured so badly, he still had tricks up his sleeve. Mental power surged out from Lin Dong's Yuewen palace, trying to locate the Death Spirit General's form within the black light. But after some effort, his search yielded nothing. Humph! As Lin Dong frowned, Little Mink's eyes suddenly sharpened like a hawk's. He thrust his hand forward, and a streak of purple-black light shot out like lightning, slamming into a patch of the fleeing black light. Boom! A low, dull sound erupted as the energy struck the black light. A shrill scream followed, and the black light swelled before vanishing into the forest, disappearing into the darkness. This guy, he's only at the 5th Nirvana stage, but he has already developed a trace of an essence spirit. It seems there's more to his background, Little Mink muttered, frowning as he watched the black light disappear. Oh! Lin Dong was surprised. Typically, an essence spirit only forms after one survives 7 Nirvana tribulations. At that point, even if their body was destroyed, they'd still have a chance to survive. Yet, the Death Spirit General, only at the 5th Nirvana stage, had reached this level. However, his essence spirit seems odd, not naturally formed. He likely used some other method, Little Mink commented. He escaped this time, but will probably face more trouble in the future, Lin Dong said. He self-destructed his body and fled with his essence spirit. If I used my true form's power, I could have captured him, But that might have drawn the attention of those powerful super sects, Little Mink replied, shaking his head. Still, there's no need to worry too much. His body is destroyed, and that trace of essence spirit is extremely weak. Restoring his strength won't be an easy task. Little Mink turned toward Lin Dong, a flicker of surprise flashing in his eyes. Your body. At that moment, Lin Dong's body was surrounded by a powerful surge of primordial energy. His injuries had completely healed, and his aura was significantly stronger than before. But what astonished Little Mink the most was the faint azure glow weaving through Lin Dong's skin, occasionally forming faint scales on his body. This time, using the heavenly dragon's energy put a great strain on my body, but I've gained a lot from it. My body now absorbs the heavenly dragon's energy faster, and the sky-transforming dragon art has advanced to its second stage, Azure Dragon Scales. Lin Dong smiled, unable to hide his excitement. The first stage of the sky-transforming dragon art, the Azure Dragon Skin, had granted him an extraordinary defense, stronger even than the Nirvana golden body of a fourth Nirvana stage expert. This defense was one of the main reasons he had been able to defeat Huang Zong. Now, having reached the second stage, Azure Dragon Scales, his power was even more formidable. Not only did his defenses grow stronger, but the scales also had offensive capabilities, comparable to the strength of a fifth Nirvana stage expert. Had he achieved this stage during his battle with Huang Zong, the result would have been far from a narrow victory, even if the latter had a heaven-tier spiritual treasure. It seems this battle wasn't without its rewards for you both, Little Mink smiled. He could sense that Lin Dong's primordial energy had reached the peak of the third Nirvana stage. It wouldn't be long before he could attempt his fourth Nirvana tribulation. And with the power of the sky-transforming dragon art, the typically dreaded Nirvana tribulation wouldn't pose much of a threat to Lin Dong. As for Little Yin, the energy surging around him was tangible, clearly signaling an imminent breakthrough. With his rare mutated constitution and the pure bloodline of the heavenly demon tiger clan, Little Yin's cultivation speed left most humans far behind. This battle, though brutal, had undoubtedly brought immense benefits to both Lin Dong and Little Yin. Let's go. It's time to move. Lin Dong stretched lazily, his injuries fully healed. It was time to step into the core region for real. He had no doubt that the place was now teeming with strong contenders. Perhaps there were already many eyes in the shadows, waiting for a chance to seize the Nirvana seal in their possession. But Lin Dong was prepared. He, too, had his eyes set on those same targets. After a year of cultivating in this ancient battleground, the time had finally come to see the fruits of their efforts. Would they return to their respective dynasties in defeat, or would they shine brilliantly and catch the eye of the super sects? That would depend on their performances in the coming days. The dense forest echoed with the sound of wind, as several figures swiftly moved through the trees like agile monkeys. The complex terrain posed no challenge to their movements. Brother Lin Dong, it seems that the other contestants are all heading toward 100 Dynasties Mountain. That's the central point of the core region and the final battleground, said one figure, lightly tapping his foot on a tree branch as he caught up to the figure in front of him. The figure in front turned his head, revealing a familiar face, Lin Dong. After dealing with the troubles brought by Lu Cheng and his men, Lin Dong and his group wasted no time in setting out. After all, with the 100 Dynasty War in full swing, it would be a shame to miss the final confrontation. 100 Dynasties Mountain. Lin Dong nodded. He had heard of that place before. It was the final gathering point for countless strong warriors in the ancient battlefield. Only those who stood out from this deadly ground would be qualified to catch the attention of the super sects. With Brother Lin Dong's current strength, even ordinary super dynasties wouldn't dare provoke you. I have no doubt you'll be noticed by the super sects this time, Su Kuei said enviously. He knew his own talent was decent, but compared to Lin Dong and his companions, there was a clear gap. If not for their help, he doubted he would have made it this far. The one silver lining for Su Kuei was his sister, Su Ro, who seemed to have had a stroke of great fortune. Even if she were the only one chosen by the super sects, this journey wouldn't have been in vain. Don't worry. Once those super sects see the power inside Su Ro, they'll definitely choose her. And when they do, you won't be left behind, Little Mink teased. Guess I'll just have to tag along then, Su Kuei chuckled, drawing laughter from the group. But Brother Lin Dong, some super dynasties are far stronger than others. If we encounter them later, we must be careful, Su Kuei warned after the moment of levity. Lin Dong nodded. He wasn't about to become arrogant just because he had defeated Fengsong. He knew that while the Stormcloud dynasty was a super dynasty, it wasn't among the top-tier dynasties of the Eastern Mystery region. There were some dynasties whose power far surpassed the ordinary. Though they couldn't compare to the super sects, they were leagues ahead of regular dynasties. The geniuses from these dynasties were extremely formidable, equipped with the finest martial arts and spiritual treasures. These were not opponents to be taken lightly. Brother Su Kuei, do you know how strong the Great Qin dynasty is? Lin Dong suddenly remembered the fire general and mountain general he had once fought. They seemed to hail from that dynasty. The Great Qin dynasty? They're quite powerful, at least a notch above the Stormcloud dynasty. Their 3 kings and 4 generals are quite famous, Su Kuei replied, pausing for a moment. Oh? Stronger than the Stormcloud dynasty by a whole level? Lin Dong was a bit surprised. Back then, the fire general and mountain general hadn't seemed too difficult to deal with. Their strength had only been at the peak of the 3rd Nirvana stage. Yet, it turned out that the Great Qin dynasty was significantly stronger than the Stormcloud dynasty. With that in mind, the so-called 3 kings from the Great Qin dynasty should be even more formidable than Fengsong. Lin Dong wondered how many of them had reached the 5th Nirvana stage. This could be troublesome, Lin Dong murmured softly. Although he didn't have a deep grudge against the Great Qin dynasty, now that they were in the core region, everyone was a competitor. Who could say whether the Great Qin dynasty might target them for the 3 heaven-tier Nirvana seals they possessed? Why? Brother Lin Dong, do you have some issues with them? Su Kuei asked quietly, noticing the shift in Lin Dong's expression. Just a small conflict, Lin Dong replied with a smile, not bothering to hide the truth. Su Kuei's face stiffened momentarily before he gave a wry smile and shook his head. Ever since meeting Lin Dong and his group, he had gradually come to realize that trouble seemed to follow them wherever they went. Even when they had a brief moment to rest, mysterious and troublesome figures would still find a way to target them. Not that Su Kuei had any regrets. Without Lin Dong and his companions, he and Su Rou might not have even made it to Myriad Elephant City. Besides, it seemed that no matter what trouble arose, Lin Dong and the others always found a way to handle it. At times, Su Kuei couldn't help but wonder how far these 3 individuals from a low-tier dynasty could go in this 100-dynasty war, where the strongest gathered. Let's pick up the pace. We're a day behind and need to catch up before sunrise. Lin Dong had no idea what Su Kuei was thinking. He glanced up at the sky, waved his hand, and then darted forward in a blur of light, speeding into the depths of the forest. Little Yin and the others followed closely behind. Throughout the night, Lin Dong and his group raced toward the heart of the core region, barely stopping. Apart from a few minor incidents, they encountered no major obstacles. By the time the dark sky began to lighten with a reddish hue, they could feel an increasing number of presences around them. There were at least a dozen super cities in the core region, many of them far larger than Myriad Elephant City. The flow of people streaming from these cities toward the core gradually converged, and the fierce, almost cruel competition began. To seize Nirvana seals from others, any and all means would be employed. Tap. Lin Dong and his companions landed on a towering tree, their eyes scanning the forest below. In several open areas, they saw numerous figures with dejected expressions, many looking ragged and worn out. Their faces were pale, and their eyes held a dull, gray despair. Those are the ones who had their Nirvana seals taken, Su Kuei remarked, his tone indifferent. There was no sympathy in his words, for competition here was ruthless. There was no room for mercy, only victory and defeat. They looked so pitiful, Su Rou, though her personality had toughened up somewhat, was still a kind-hearted girl. She bit her lip as she looked at the scene before her. The strong rule while the weak serve. It's an unchanging truth, Lin Dong said quietly. This was the rule of this place, and they were all bound by it. Even he couldn't guarantee that he'd make it to the end. No one could predict when a powerful opponent might appear and rob them of their Nirvana seals. Su Rou bit her lip harder. Though kind-hearted, she was not foolish. She wouldn't ask Lin Dong to help those people. She knew full well that without meeting Lin Dong and his group, she and Su Kuei might not even have had the chance to enter the core region. If anything, they were probably worse off than those people. Let's go. Lin Dong didn't linger. With a wave of his hand, they shot forward again. The defeated individuals below barely spared them a glance, as if they had no energy left for anything else. As they gradually caught up to the main forces streaming from the super cities, the intensity of the surrounding auras increased. Clashes erupted constantly, and in just a few minutes, Lin Dong witnessed nearly 10 battles. People were fighting to the death for Nirvana seals, and the atmosphere was growing more frenzied, as if everyone was on the verge of madness. Brother Lin Dong, up ahead is a rest area. These places are full of all sorts of people. Given that the strongest in the ancient battlefield are gathering here in the core region, you never know who you might run into, Su Kuei said, glancing at the thinning trees around them. Let's move on. Lin Dong thought for a moment before responding. He didn't want to waste time in such places. While they needed to absorb Nirvana seals to advance, there would be better opportunities ahead. Su Kuei nodded, but as they approached the rest area, Lin Dong suddenly slowed down. Brother Lin Dong? What's wrong? Su Kuei asked, noticing the change in pace. Lin Dong raised his head and looked toward a rocky clearing in the forest ahead. It was teeming with people, the air thick with violent surges of primordial energy. Clearly, the place was far from peaceful. There are some familiar presences there, Lin Dong said with a faint smile, his eyes narrowing slightly.